Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Walton. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Friday, November 17th, 2017. That's two 17s in there for you. So, again, hit the lottery stores when you can. Here's some good news. Everything was working fine, and then Skype has been redesigned, they tell me each morning. And now I have to wade through their tutorial to find the don't show me the tutorial now. I'm about to use Skype. Just get out of my way and make it like it used to be. And that's what they need to do for updates. There needs to be a notification that says we've updated the program. Click here to actually begin using it. And we left it the way it was yesterday so that you could use the thing in case you just signed on with seconds to spare, let's say, theoretically. And you can use it just like you used it yesterday. And then later, when you're done, we'll remind you again, and you can click a button to be taken to the tutorial. Why can't that be invented? I think I just, maybe I revolutionized tech, but maybe not. Of course, everyone else has to do it. Usually third-party providers have to provide you some sort of app that will take you back to the way your program used to be, or make it look like it used to look, which really, I don't know. I don't think anybody has ever redesigned anything where I've said, oh, good. This is great. I'd love to just try this blind right now. That would be fantastic. But I don't know. They just don't think about us out there. And I don't know. Are they in Silicon Valley? Where's Skype? You tell me where they're located. Okay. Ready to start the show today? I'm not. So maybe one of you wants to call in and do it. I couldn't connect you if I wanted to, I guess. I don't know. Maybe it'll become obvious how you would connect a caller. Maybe Armando will call and take over the show, and that's how we'll figure it out. I think I managed to get out of the tutorial, but we are ready to roll and ready to pick up where we left off yesterday, which is to say in utter confusion. When we left yesterday, it was great because we left. I was like, this is fantastic. I'm not broadcasting anymore. But then I realized I would have to come back today. Tomorrow, of course, is the weekend, so I'll get some time off then. Not that don't make me describe my schedule to you, please. It's not good time. It's not good quality time off happening tomorrow. But when we left yesterday, Roy Moore was a filthy, disgusting pervert. He's still a filthy, disgusting pervert. But now we are being asked to consider whether or not perhaps Senator Al Franken is either a filthy, disgusting pervert himself or something quite like it, or just plays one on TV. We're not really sure what's going on. I will say this. Yesterday was a spectacular show on Twitter as Republicans and neutral journalists alike took to Twitter to tell everybody that it was absolutely disgusting to them that so many Democrats were so hypocritical about Senator Franken and what to do with him. And I could not find very many or any of those people. And I was very disappointed, actually, as Daniel Dale joined in that. And I like Daniel Dale's reporting. And I don't know whether he felt like he had to sort of maintain the reporter neutrality thing. But one of the first things he said about it was, it really doesn't look like he's actually making contact in that photo. Now, that's not a good excuse. He says it doesn't excuse the judgment of taking that photo, or let's just foreshadow the rest of the commentary on this situation, and say it doesn't look like it's bad judgment to take that photo or pose for that photo, but it doesn't look like he's making contact. And then a couple minutes later, his tweet was all about, wow, surprising to see so many Twitter Dems excusing this or blowing it off or sweeping it under the rug. I don't remember exactly what the terminology was that he used, but I was surprised by that because just minutes earlier he had said the same thing, that he was surprised that there were Twitter Dems blowing this thing off. And by the way, he was challenged on, what do you mean Twitter Dems? Who? Oh, just random people, he was saying. It wasn't like any prominent Democrats said, well, it's okay because he's not actually touching her. Somebody said it. And I saw several people say it, and I saw several people noting it, including Daniel Dale, which was what was so weird to me about this. He said it, and then a few minutes later, he says, I'm surprised that all these Twitter Dems, whom he would not identify, saying it's all okay because he didn't actually make contact. You just said that. I don't understand why, when you said it, it was neutral and journalisty and high-minded, whereas when somebody else says it, it's, oh, you're excusing it. Well, are you sure they're excusing it? You said it, but then you qualified it. Did they qualify it? Did they qualify it in the same tweet? Does it have to be qualified in the same tweet? Could it be qualified later in another tweet or earlier in another tweet? I don't know. I found the whole reaction very weird. And as the day progressed, first Al Franken made a first stab at apologizing, and nobody liked it. Nobody thought that it was sufficient, and it was insufficient in any, I don't know, I guess in any case. Certainly it was insufficient based on what we knew, or that early in the story. And then he took a second stab at the apology, and that one was much better. And I guess that's good. But then information began to circulate, which I don't know. Do I dare call it information? It could be misinformation, could be disinformation. But rumors, I guess we can call them that, began to circulate because I never saw anything really solidly sourced on this. But there was much swirling that was going on with this rumor that the photographer who took the picture says that the picture was basically staged and that everybody was in on the staging, and that this woman, I don't have her name handy and I probably should, but the anchor for the morning news program and the ABC Los Angeles affiliate, and the name will come to me eventually, or at least someone will throw the name at me eventually, that she was in on this joke. She wasn't really asleep, and that they were doing some kind of a sketch or just joking around. That doesn't really help very much, because it's like, well, maybe that shouldn't be your joke. It would really help if you made jokes about something else instead. But then further rumors circulating, I guess this part would not be necessarily rumor, but apparently this woman, in addition to anchoring the Fox, or rather the ABC morning news show out there in Los Angeles, apparently what would you say, close associate of Sean Hannity. So several appearances on his show, very clearly a conservative media figure. So that, I guess, raises certain suspicions about what? I'm not entirely sure. No one has quite put their finger on it, except that I guess that's supposed to raise the possibility that she was working with Hannity and or some other combination of conservative media figures to say, I know of this photo, and we could make it look like it was an actual incident of sexual harassment. I guess that was supposed to be the implication of her having worked with Hannity, but there's really no indication that is the case. So I don't know, but it raised some questions. There's a bunch of circumstantial evidence. That's what's happening here. Because another piece that fell into place was, you know what? I can't even say fell into place. It fell, and it's not really in place. There's no place for it yet. It doesn't really come together as a coherent story just yet. But Roger Stone apparently tweeted late the previous evening that he had reason to believe that Al Franken was going to find himself under sex scandal scrutiny very shortly the next day. Now, that story didn't break until yesterday morning. Roger Stone knew about it the previous evening. That could happen one of several ways. One, he could be plotting it with somebody, or two, the information could have been shared with him, as in, we're going to run this story tomorrow and just wanted to tip you off to it. Now, he's not quoted in the story anywhere, so that's not the avenue by which the information comes to him. And it does raise the possibility that conservative media figures did, in fact, circulate that story among themselves before it broke. And I don't know, maybe she is conservative. Maybe she's conservative in telling the truth. It's rare, but it does happen. And it could be that she says, well, I'm going to tell my story. And she may have tipped off somebody who knew somebody who knew somebody who knew Roger Stone. She may be friends with Roger Stone, for all I know, and may have said, yeah, I'm finally telling that story, which is true, and it's going to break tomorrow. And I just thought you might like to know about it. And that's legit, although really, honestly, why you would do something like that. I guess if you had a story like that to tell and it was finally getting that story off your chest, I don't know that Roger Stone would be a guy I would call and tell about that. But I don't know. Maybe, I don't know. But it does create a weird set of circumstances. And if you have that in mind, looking back, I thought, at Al Franken's first go-round on the apology, he's hedging. And he's very hesitant to simply say the whole thing is horrible and I hate myself, or whatever whatever he finally came around to saying in the second round. But he was very cagey about it. And then, of course, when Mitch McConnell came out and said, well, we ought to have an ethics committee investigation into it, and Franken very shortly thereafter said, yes, as a matter of fact, we should have that. I want to have that. I call for that myself. That made me think like he may have known and again, it's certainly not proof. It's all circumstantial, this evidence, but it seemed to make more sense. His first go round seemed to make more sense once this other information came out, as if he wanted to say, hey, I really don't, the first apology was, I don't remember the incident the same way that she does. And he acknowledged, that could be a matter of skewed perceptions as between him and her, or as between men and women generally. And that was something that needed to be addressed, certainly, and it is. And it probably explains a lot of strange situations wherein women remember harassment that men simply don't. And there could be a whole week spent on why that might be the case. But it sounded also like he had a version of the story to tell, but was smart enough to realize that telling it immediately in the aftermath of the leveling of these charges in this atmosphere would simply make it look worse, would simply make it look like he was denying the possibility that she was telling the truth, and therefore not listening to women, as we've been encouraging everybody to do all this time throughout the other incidents in this rash of opening up and remembering and calling people out and holding people to account on their sexual harassment, as we've seen in a number of these instances. And it would really, it was very, what can I say? Certainly if it was if not a plot of some kind to mischaracterize, then at least a plot of some kind to say, let us throw a Democratic counterweight into this with legitimate charges and see if we can undo some of the damage that's been done to Republicans in all this. Although since the whole thing started with, as Harvey Weinstein, he gave lots of money to Democrats, and so it's really a Democratic Party problem, although I would have said Democrat Party problem, not ours. That never really took root, which I guess is a small silver lining to all this. At the very least, the issue is closer to remaining nonpartisan, but it gives rise to other issues which are not nonpartisan, of course. But it felt to me like, on second look at his first pass at the apology, like he really wanted to tell this story, knew that it would be dangerous and even more complicating to tell it even if it were true, and that the offer, almost, as he would then view it, of an ethics committee investigation, of a calmer, more rational sit-down approach to let's hash out what just happened here, with formal testimony and a controlled setting, might actually afford him the opportunity to tell that story. Looking ahead to a possibility like that, I could see where he might say, look, I don't remember it the same way, but let's get to a place where we can discuss this more rationally, and I will tell you what happened from my side of the story. But it probably occurred to him pretty quickly. And there's really no way in the immediate aftermath of the breaking of this story to even hold that promise out without looking like it's I am going to dispute the credibility of this woman's story, because there isn't any way to do it. He might actually be planning to do that. I wondered about that possibility, and it might all fall apart. All this conjecture may be for naught. He may, in fact, come right out and simply say, as he came closer to doing in the second go-around, I did this. It had there was a reason at the time, and upon reflection, that reason falls apart. It should have fallen apart more immediately, like at the time to me, but it didn't, and I'm disappointed that it didn't, and I'm sure we're all disappointed that it didn't also. All of which is not to say that this leads us to one or another obvious conclusion about what he should do next and whether he should go. However, it does raise issues that take us into partisan territory when you contemplate the very real possibility that if this were all to work out, certainly as Republicans hope it would work out, and I might add, many Democrats also at this point hope it would work out this way on the Franken side, we may find ourselves in next year in a Senate that has no Al Franken in it, but does have a Roy Moore in it. That's still a distinct possibility, though the polls clearly are saying that there's a real chance that Alabamians, I'm guessing about that first or that second A in the pronunciation. I know that there's an I in Alabamians/Alabamians. I have just no idea how they actually say it, but I know how they spell it. That's a step forward. But there's a real chance that they may, in fact, do the right thing. They have done the right thing in the past. It's not commonly done in elections, but I think that maybe even in that context, they could end up doing the right thing, and we won't have to deal with this. Or, for that matter, I guess it's entirely possible that Republicans in the Senate may be moved to do the right thing. But, man, that feels even less likely than the Alabama electorate at large, despite the fact that many millions of Alabamians probably do think it's the right thing to do not to even start out on the wrong foot and put Roy Moore in the Senate. It could happen anyway. And, it's possible that all of that falls apart and we find ourselves in a Senate without an Al Franken and with a Roy Moore. Now, we may get an excellent replacement. I guess it's worth noting from the political side that the governor of Minnesota is a Democrat, and we're likely to get a decent replacement, and it won't change the balance of the Senate. But it concerns me, certainly, that the outcome of all of this may once again be there is no rule, there is no law, there are no mores for Republicans, and Democrats get embarrassed and resign. And I think there's a lot of people that know that and know that they can play against it, and they could absolutely make use of that and find themselves expelling or calling for the expulsion of, or rather the resignation anyway, of Democrats, but having no intention whatsoever of applying that same standard to themselves, going ahead, winning elections, and making the Senate more Trumpian in the end, which is a huge loss for this moment, whatever this moment turns out to be. And I guess that's open to question now. Anyway, so that's currently where we stand. We will find out, I guess the first development in all of this looks to be the special election in Alabama and not the immediate resignation of Al Franken. I guess he's going to see if he can at least wait for the ethics inquiry into this. But I don't know. Now I suspect, I wouldn't be surprised, let's say, to see Mitch McConnell, after having called for an ethics committee investigation, delay the start of that ethics committee investigation. I think probably the play here would be he'd want to wait until after the special election so that Al Franken remained a live issue in the news to distract from Roy Moore's own problems and to be used as a counterpoint to Roy Moore's problems, and let Alabamians go to the polls with their what if or what about story fresh in mind and still live. I imagine that weirdly, McConnell will be in no rush to resolve this very serious issue about which he's called for a ethics committee investigation, which is a very serious answer in itself, and about which he has gotten agreement from the target himself. So you would think there's no reason that that investigation can't start today, but it won't, curiously enough. So we'll sit and wait. Let's see. Rebecca Romans suggests that this sums up the situation pretty well. That would be a good thing to do 20 minutes into the situation. Let's take a look. Alan Clifton's tweet is what she has retweeted here. I don't know anything. Is Alan Clifton a famous dude or a regular dude like you and me? Co-founder of Forward Progressives. Okay. So I'd say that qualifies him as regular person like you and me. Alan Clifton says, Al Franken gave a woman an aggressive, though consensual yet unwanted, a lot of qualifiers in this, kiss during a skit rehearsal. She agreed to then take a childish, tacky picture while she slept. If she was sleeping, she didn't agree to do it. I heard, though, from the story was, and again, it never got printed anywhere that I can point you to link-wise. It just got tweeted around that they had staged this and she was pretending to be asleep. But I don't know, man. I don't know what happened there. Anyway, Alan Clifton is saying, and I don't know why. That they agreed to take this picture, and Roy Moore, of course, molested underage girls. Well, that's a big difference. That does sound kind of like there's a differentiation to be made there. One was a mistake Franken apologized for. The other is a felony Moore denies. Okay, that is a big difference. On the other hand, we also have situations like this one. Let's give counterpoint, shall we? In the Washington Post today, a piece by Kate Harding that is entitled, I'm a feminist, I study rape culture, and I don't want Al Franken to resign. I haven't read it. I have seen it. And I have seen the screen cap of the title picked up by Christina Pelosi, who has this to say. Here's the counterpoint. Disagree. Al Franken being a Democrat isn't itself a reason to stay. Investigate facts and let chips fall where they may. As a feminist and former sex assault prosecutor, I say put principle over party. Otherwise, women's equality isn't principle, but situational. And then all the hashtags, Me Too and We Said Enough. And I think I'm there. I go a lot of places Christina Pelosi goes. I mean, not physically. I think ideologically. We wind up in the same place very frequently, and I think I'm there. I have to say, yeah, I guess I'm with that. Chips fall where they may. I don't know if that's a correct reading of Kate Harding's piece, but I think what I saw circulating on Twitter suggests And I will say this. I think I ultimately disagree with the conclusion of the piece according to how Christina Pelosi is reading it. But I guess it should be noted that Kate Harding, I think, is making many of the same points that I just made about how it's really dangerous that all of this stuff applies to Democrats and never to Republicans. And that's a valid point that I can agree with and still say, if the decision is, well, forget it about, never mind about Al Franken, let him stay and move on to something else, that's not the conclusion I want to reach. However, it is the conclusion that is still reachable through Pelosi's point, which is, well, let's investigate, let the chips fall where they may. If the chips fall on the side in the end of, yeah, you know what, don't resign, for whatever reason, that's got to be okay. I mean, that if that's not an okay conclusion from letting the chips fall where they may, then we weren't being honest about asking that those chips fall where they may. We have a preset conclusion, and we don't want chips to fall. We just want to force somebody out. So I don't know. I think that, well, gee whiz, there's a lot of nuance to this and everything else, and it should be unsurprising. Meanwhile, as we come up on time for our first break, we have, oops, look at this. Oop, hang on a second. Wrong button pressed. Just trying to get my soundboard back up, not intending to launch any articles, but okay, or any files. We haven't caught up with the latest Trump tweet phenomenon and all this, but I know for sure that you already know exactly what I'm talking about. Yes, Trump took to Twitter now that he's back from Asia to amazingly, miraculously, hilariously, ridiculously condemn Al Franken and all this and say what a disgusting perv he is. He has had nothing to say about Roy Moore, but of course, you know, he's one too, but he says nothing. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, interrupting this little break to say thanks so much to all of you who are contributing supporters of Kagro in the Morning. Thousands of you are downloading the show each day, but fewer than 1 in 25 regular listeners are donating to help keep us on the air. For the money you'd spend on a single 3-minute iTunes song, we bring you 2 hours of great news and entertainment every day, 5 days a week. Patreon.com, Patreon.com makes it easy. You can find us there by searching KagroX or David Waldman or Kagro in the Morning or even Daily Coast Radio in their search box, and you'll be right where you need to be to make easy, recurring, monthly contributions to support our show. Once again, thanks so much for your support. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Let's get back to the discussion. Maybe I should be looking at Kate Harding's piece here. I guess we might as well, since it's a topic of discussion, and having discussed it, I might as well know what we're talking about here. Kate Harding, by the way, described in the up at the top of this piece. Kate Harding is a co-editor of Nasty Women, Feminism, Resistance, and Revolution in Trump's America, co-host of the podcast, there you go, podcast, Feminasty, holy moly, that's, okay, it's a name, and author of Asking for It, The Alarming Rise of Rape Culture and What We Can Do About It. And so, okay, those are some creds, right? Are we into that sort of thing? From time to time, we're going to get an idea of where she's coming from. So yeah, I guess that's supposed to mean well, you should be then surprised at the conclusion, perhaps. Let's take a look. As a feminist and an author of a book on rape culture, I could reasonably be expected to lead the calls for Al Franken to step down following allegations he forced his tongue down a woman's throat. Oh, this is a terrible topic for the morning shows, by the way. Just honest to God. All right. The tongues. Yesterday, today. Anyway, accompanied by a photo of him grinning as he moves in to grope her breasts while she sleeps. It's disgusting. He treated a sleeping woman as a comedy prop. Maybe. No more human than the contents of Carrot Top's trunk. And I firmly believe he should suffer social and professional consequences for it. Okay. Good there so far. But I don't believe resigning from his position is the only possible consequence or the one that's best for American women. Okay, it's a possibility. Cynics on both the right and left will presume I am passing by this particular steam tray on 2017's smorgasbord of feminist outrage. Not my words. Okay, I get hit, I think, for that line, but okay. Because Franken is a Democrat and so am I. I was even his proud constituent for 2 years. In the most superficial sense, this is true, but it's meaningless to say it's because I am a Democrat without asking why I am a Democrat. That sounds like good nuance. Is there good stuff coming? Sounds like it. If you understand what it means to be a Democrat today, we might. That is why it makes sense to vote blue over red in this highly polarized political environment. You can understand why it might not make the most sense to demand Franken's resignation effective immediately. I am a Democrat because I am a feminist who lives under a two-party system where one party consistently votes against the interests of women while the other sometimes does not. Understood. Got it. Agreed. I am not a true believer in the party itself nor in any politician. Good. I'm with that. I am a realist, we hope, who recognizes that we get two viable choices and Democrats are members of the only party positioned to pump the brakes on Republicans' gleeful race toward Atwoodian dystopia. I am in general agreement, although I recognize that here we'll have some dissension in our ranks among those who say, all right, wait a second, hold on. Now we're getting into the inevitability of two parties theory versus at least the rise of a third party that might replace one of the two existing parties. And okay, we've had that discussion. I still lean more towards the inevitability of two, but whatever, that's a different discussion. Meanwhile, I recognize that men's harassment of and violence against women is a systemic issue, not a Democrat or Republican problem, a Hollywood problem, a sports problem, or a media problem. Its roots lie in a patriarchal culture that trains men to believe they are entitled to control women's bodies for sex, for sport, for childbearing, for comedy. When you combine these things, an unawareness that the Democratic, an awareness, did I say unawareness? An awareness that the Democratic Party is no more or less than best of two, and an understanding that men in power frequently exploit women, it becomes difficult to believe that Franken is the only sitting Democrat with a history of harassment, abuse, or assault. That's probably true, right? Okay, so I'm with that part of it. The recent Me Too campaign, the hashtag Me Too campaign, demonstrated how normalized unwanted kissing and groping are in our culture, which is still astounding to me. I don't know, but people say it's true, and I'm willing to believe the worst about people. I don't know why I would be hesitant. I can't believe it because I'm like, why are you doing this? Not, are you doing it? I believe that. Why is my bigger question, but I guess I have some guesses at the answer. Donald Trump was caught on tape crudely admitting to both of those transgressions, and we made him our president. It's true. We did do that. We think we did that. It may have been someone else who did that. According to the CDC's National Intimate Partner and Sexual Violence Survey, and I'm surprised really that Republicans haven't abolished that, and I probably shouldn't have said that because by the afternoon they will have done it. Well, not this afternoon because they went home already. 1 in 3 women experiences some sort of contact sexual violence in her life. Sexual harassment and assault are simply too widespread for Democrats to respond to Franken's offense with only Franken in mind. We need to respond in a way that helps us develop a protocol for meaningful change. It would feel good momentarily to see Franken resign and the Democratic governor of Minnesota, Mark Dayton, appoint a senator who has not, as far as we know, harmed women. If I believe for 1 second that Franken is the only Democrat in the Senate who has done something like this, with or without photographic evidence, I would see that as the best and most appropriate option. But in the world we actually live in, I'm betting that there will be more, and more after that. And they won't all come from states with Democratic governors and a deep bench of progressive replacements. Some will, if ousted, have their successors chosen by Republicans. That's clearly true. You could dispute whether or not that's a valid observation to make, but it's clearly true. I'll give it that. In other words, if we set this precedent in the interest of demonstrating our party's solidarity with harassed and abused women, we're only going to drain the swamp of people who, however flawed, still regularly vote to protect women's rights and freedoms. Yes. Okay. The legislative branch will remain chock-a-block with old white Republican men who regard women chiefly as sex objects and unpaid housekeepers, and we'll show them how staunchly Democrats oppose their misogynistic attitudes by handing them more power. That's probably true. I think that's where I was. And it's problematic, but there it is. Isn't that hypocritical, I hear you asking? Because Republicans won't do the right thing, we shouldn't either. But if the short-term right thing leads to long-term political catastrophe for American women, I think we need to reconsider our definition of the right thing. I am in no way suggesting that we decline to hold Franken accountable for his offenses, only that we think in terms of consequences that might actually improve women's lives going forward. Well, again, I find myself in agreement. Boy, I guess I like a lot of people and their thoughts in this process. Okay. For example, if Franken genuinely wishes to be an ally to women, as he claimed in an expanded statement on Thursday, here's what I would like to see him do. First, cooperate fully with an ethics investigation as promised. Second, declare as soon as possible that he will not run again in 2020, so other Democratic candidates for that seat will have plenty of time to prepare their campaigns. Third, go on a listening tour to learn what the women of Minnesota, Native American women, Somali women, Hmong women, interesting to throw in there, why not? I like the diversity. Karen women? What? You know what? It caught me flat-footed on the diversity implications there. I don't even know what we're talking about. That's how isolated I feel in this one. Disabled women, queer women, working class women. Most want him to fight for in his remaining time and go to the mat for their needs. Accept that some women will not want to talk to him at all, or will only want to yell at him for being a pig. Go anyway. That's the listening tour, is where you should be going. After all that, I would like to see him support a qualified progressive woman who will carry on that important work to run for his seat. If she won, she would be the second woman ever elected to represent Minnesota in the Senate. Minnesota has been a state since 1858. Whether he does so publicly or behind the scenes will depend on the sincerity of his atonement and Minnesotans' perception of the same. If they forgive him, he can stump for her. If they don't, he can still offer fundraising expertise, connections, and advice privately, but not if you listen to Republicans, of course. Their next step in all of this was to demand that anyone who had gotten a contribution from Al Franken refund it to him. I don't know how helpful that is for anybody, but okay. He can leverage the many advantages of being an older, famous white man, which inevitably persist despite temporary ignominy, to elevate a progressive woman to the political height he once achieved. Then, if, but like I said, I'm a realist, another Democratic politician's sexual misconduct is revealed, we can ask the same of him. Don't just apologize and drop out of sight. Do penance. Live the values you campaigned on. Be a selfless champion for women's rights. There are, of course, limits to this formula. If a Democratic official is credibly accused of a violent assault, or if their alleged abuses relate to or involve their work in politics, we should demand their resignation and encourage a full investigation. As I write this, only one woman has alleged that Franken assaulted her. If her story emboldens others to tell theirs, and the senator is revealed to be a serial predator, then I wouldn't want him in a position of power for more than 1 minute. Or one more minute, I guess. If, by some miracle, Republicans actually do start holding their own accountable for sexual misconduct instead of arguing about whether a grown man who preys on teenagers is fit for office, then most of my argument dissolves. which is not a good thing to have happen to your argument, but I think if it's based on our perception of how Republicans handle these things versus how Democrats do, it's a argument that needs to be had. In the happy circumstance, I would gladly throw all the sexist jerks into the sea, regardless of party affiliation. But in a sharply divided political climate where toxic masculinity knows no party, yet is only ever acknowledged by one, we must think about how to minimize harm to women. One more empty apology and resignation, one more head on a pike will not make American women safer or better off. Powerful men lifting up women's concerns and supporting progressive women candidates, however, could be a real step toward changing the culture that makes victims of so many of us. I agree with two women. What am I going to do now? I don't know. Both good points. Glad they were made and made in organized fashion so that I could present them to you instead of stumbling through it for you myself. Okay. Man. Well, I don't know exactly what to do with that one or how to conclude in all of that, but just say I guess we will we'll be waiting to see how this plays out in the coming days. I guess, thank God it's Friday, even if it's not next Friday yet. I'm still waiting on that one. But we could use a weekend break, although this will be, of course, the discussion of the Sunday shows, no doubt. All right, let's see. We'll hold on to that. Let's head back to, you know what? I haven't even opened Pocket yet this morning, so I am remiss in all this. Donald Trump and his crazy foray into all this. I don't really know. I mean, he's just got no self-control, so I guess he'd throw himself into this. And maybe he thought, and probably correctly, that if he drew more heat to himself, as he would almost inevitably, no matter what he tweets, but throwing himself into a sexual harassment situation is obviously going to draw a lot of attention. We would, I don't know what, look away from the horrendous tax bill. That's what Twitter would tell you anyway is happening. You're being distracted from the horrific tax bill. Well, that's probably true. So perhaps we could pay some attention to that and bring us up to date on that. I've had for a long time a couple of the itemized complaint lists about what's going on in the tax bill, and there's lots to be upset about, but there are a number of other items that require our attention as well. So let's see. We'll go, I don't know. We'll go at random, I think, in all of this. Let's see. First of all, I guess one thing we want to put on the record is that we have reached a small-ish milestone in the Trump-Russia investigation front. The Hill is reporting on a Wall Street Journal piece, which Wall Street Journal pieces are frequently, we find them behind paywalls, as is the case with this one. So we're relying on the Hill's reporting about Wall Street Journal's report. The milestone in question, Mueller subpoenaed Trump campaign for Russia documents. That billed on Twitter as the first subpoena for documents from the Trump campaign to come out of this investigation. Special counsel Robert Mueller's investigators have issued a subpoena to President Trump's election campaign for documents related to Russia, according to a new report. This sweeps Jared Kushner back into the spotlight, by the way. The Wall Street Journal reports that Mueller's team issued the subpoena in mid-October, requesting documents and emails from over a dozen top campaign officials that include several key words related to Russia. A source familiar with the matter told the Journal that the subpoena would not compel testimony before a grand jury, but that Trump's campaign was surprised by the order after voluntarily cooperating with previous requests from Mueller's team. I guess the problem here really is that they didn't actually cooperate with the previous request. They half-assed it. And now they're going to be subpoenaed because they didn't comply. Brandon Carter is the writer for The Hill here, and so I guess I could question some of that, but let's read on. Trump's campaign began turning over documents to Mueller in September, with one lawyer that represents Trump saying the campaign was in, quote, total cooperation with the special counsel's investigation into Russian interference in the 2016 elections. That, of course, turns out not to be true. But the subpoena marks the first time Trump's campaign has been ordered to turn over information to Mueller's investigation. Mueller has previously subpoenaed former Trump campaign chairman Paul Manafort and several of his associates, as well as subpoenaing several banks to obtain Manafort's financial records. But I guess this is the first one to the campaign itself. In late October, Manafort was charged with multiple counts. Of course, you know about this, including conspiracy against the United States, and you know about how valuable or not valuable, actually, really, but you can weigh it either way. That charge is also money laundering, of course, which I think is at the heart of all of this. So what's happening here? Well, like I said, you only get to this stage. You're only subpoenaing documents when you get to the stage that you really realize, they're not actually cooperating at all. If they were, we wouldn't need to go the subpoena route. So what's happening here? Let's take a look at this Politico piece that I think we're talking about the same situation here. We'll see whether anybody makes it explicit. Kushner got emails about WikiLeaks and about Russia in 2016, lawmakers say. That's a Kyle Cheney piece in Politico from yesterday. Jared Kushner received emails in September of 2016 about WikiLeaks and about a, quote, Russian backdoor overture and dinner invite. It's a weird combination, but that's what it says. And forwarded them to another campaign official, according to a letter to his attorney from the bipartisan leaders of the Senate Judiciary Committee. So I guess there are actually two different demands here going on. So it may be that Kushner is not involved as closely in the Mueller push for a subpoena as I thought. I may have crossed the two of these up. This is the Senate Judiciary Committee acknowledging this lack of cooperation, which, by the way, is like Kushner's fifth. Lack of cooperation / oops, I forgot to disclose something critically important and central to the disclosure request in the first place. Committee Chair Chuck Grassley and Ranking Member Dianne Feinstein said Kushner failed to turn over the relevant documents when asked for them last month. What a surprise. We appreciate your voluntary cooperation with the committee's investigation, just as I'm sure Mr. Mueller appreciates your so-called voluntary cooperation with him. But the production appears to have been incomplete, the pair wrote in a letter dated Thursday to Kushner's attorney, Abby Lowell. Lowell said in a statement that he and Kushner, President Donald Trump's son-in-law, thank you for telling us, and a White House senior advisor, again, had been responsive to the request, but apparently they weren't. We provided the Judiciary Committee with all relevant documents that had to do with Mr. Kushner's calls, contacts, or meetings with Russians during the campaign and transition, which was the request, Lowell said, adding that he and Kushner had also told the committee they would be open to additional requests for information, which is surely how they characterize this. I characterize it as, you're not done with part one yet. In a section of the letter titled Missing Documents, Grassley and Feinstein said Kushner had handed over some materials but omitted communications that mentioned some of the people connected to the investigation into Russian meddling in the 2016 election. If, as you suggest, Mr. Kushner was unaware of, for example, any attempts at Russian interference in the 2016 presidential election, then presumably there would be few communications concerning many of the persons identified, the lawmakers wrote. Grassley and Feinstein also alluded to documents they received from other witnesses on which Kushner was copied. That's the problem. Other parties have produced September 2016 email communications to Mr. Kushner concerning WikiLeaks, which Mr. Kushner then forwarded to another campaign official, they wrote. Such documents should have been produced, but were not. Likewise, the letter continued, other parties have produced documents concerning a Russian backdoor overture and dinner invite, which, again, Mr. Kushner also forwarded. And still others have produced communications with Sergei Milian, copied to Mr. Kushner. Again, these do not appear in Mr. Kushner's production despite being responsive to the second request. You also have not produced any phone records that we presume exist and would relate to Mr. Kushner's communications regarding several requests. They asked Kushner to turn over all responsive documents by November 27th. According to the lawmakers, Kushner's attorney suggested providing some documents might, quote, implicate the president's executive privilege, unquote. Oh, really? In their letter, they asked Lowell to resolve those issues and produce the documents or create a privilege log to detail over which documents the president is asserting executive privilege. That was a little awkward in the construction, but we get it. Grassley and Feinstein also said Kushner declined to produce documents connected to his security clearance application, citing their confidentiality. The lawmakers said they intend to take Lowell up on a separate request to visit his office to review the documents in person, but they said the committee would not waive its request to obtain its own copies. The committee is also seeking another broad group of documents about Kushner's contacts with former National Security Advisor Mike Flynn, who is a spy, I'll add. Grassley and Feinstein said they'd like all communications between Kushner and Flynn since Election Day 2016, as well as any communications that reference email hacking, Russia, the Magnitsky Act, and other people or entities that have been implicated in the Russian interference scheme. You should probably go grab the Turkey documents as well. After all, it is Thanksgiving. The lawmakers said they have yet to receive access to Kushner's lengthy interview with the Senate Intelligence Committee and are seeking a copy of it from Lowell to determine whether the transcript satisfies the needs of our investigation. Long story short, then, again, on that one, give us all the documents you have in email about Russia and contacts with it. Okay, I will voluntarily comply. Here they are. You know what's missing from this? At a minimum, we are missing all the emails on which you are copied and which we see that you forwarded to other people, and yet you failed to disclose to us. This is clearly an email that you sent that had to do with Russia. Well, I didn't send it. I forwarded it. That counts. That's certainly an affirmative act, among other things. But look, go to your email and search for Russia. And if the Russian document comes up, give it to us. Don't tell us, I only forwarded it. Besides which, you're busted by everybody else who actually produced these things already. So we already have seen a record of what was really in your email traffic, in your inbox, with regard to Russia. And there's no sense in hiding it. But of course, for Kushner, look, no one's going to arrest him. No one's going to impeach him. No one's going to repeal his security clearance. There's nothing that can be done on that front in the current political environment, and he knows it. And so it's flick F you. Who cares? Come and get me. None of you are going to arrest me. None of you can get me in trouble. None of you can get me fired. None of you can get my security clearance revoked. So kiss my ass. I'll disclose on my own schedule. Thank you very much. And effectively, he's right. And it will continue. And there will be other parties that do this. Anybody who thinks that they will be protected forever by Donald Trump is, I assume, going to be doing this and going to be doing it forever until somebody can do something about it, which may never come about. All right. So that's a great start for the day, too. Another reminder of, oh, my God, why do we have to deal with these people? And are we ever going to be able to get rid of them? Phew. All right, let's see. Other information that we might share in all of this. Man, do I even really want to go back over to Roy Moore? I guess so. Yes and no. No, because we've done enough. Yes, because, man, there's some really serious additional information that's not specifically about him, but that is more generally applicable and important. We're coming up on break time, though, so I'll get a start, and you'll see where we're going on this, and we'll consider whether we want the whole thing or not. Another opinion piece, this time from the Los Angeles Times, by Catherine Brightbill, which is titled, Roy Moore's alleged pursuit of a young girl is the symptom of a larger problem, we know that, in evangelical circles. Oh, and we kind of knew that too. But rather than my just blathering on about it, why don't we let Catherine do that in more organized fashion, because she makes an important point. We need to talk about the segment of American culture that probably doesn't think the allegations against Roy Moore are particularly damning. The segment that will blanch only at only two accusations in the Washington Post expose. One, he pursued a 14-year-old girl without first getting her parents' permission, and he initiated sexual contact outside of marriage. That segment is evangelicalism. I gotta say, it's not evangelism, but evangelicalism. In that world which Moore travels in, and I grew up in, 14-year-old girls courting adult men isn't uncommon. Well, we really do have something to talk about here. I use the phrase 14-year-old girls courting adult men rather than adult men courting 14-year-old girls for a reason. Evangelicals routinely frame these relationships in those terms. That's how I was introduced to these relationships as a homeschooled teenager in the 1990s. And it's the language that my friends and I would use to discuss girls we knew who were in parent-sanctioned relationships with older men. This is a part of the world about which I only have the vaguest idea, but it does sort of ring true. One popular courtship story that was told and retold in homeschool circles during the 1990s was that of Matthew and Maranatha, am I getting that right? Maranatha Chapman, who turned their history into a successful career promoting young marriage. That sounds dangerous. What are we talking about here? Most audiences, however, didn't realize just how young the Chapmans had in mind until the site Homeschoolers Anonymous. Have you ever heard of this one? Homeschoolers Anonymous. And the blogger Libby Ann revealed that Matthew was 27 and Maranatha was 15 when they married. Libby Ann also drew mainstream attention to Matthew Chapman's writings, in which he argued that parents should consider marriage for their daughters in their middle teens. At that point, the Chapmans stopped receiving quite so many speaking invitations. How interesting is that? We'll talk more about it after this next break. Welcome back now from our brief break here at the top of the hour to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. We fade away our music. Let's see. I'm trying to figure out. We're going to continue with this article and having a discussion in the background here with Armando, and he's got some thoughts to add to this whole situation. Although I'm thinking I'd really actually like to get through this article. We may wander back into this and then to get into the tax bill a little bit. And as I was just saying to him in the background, I don't know whether the thing to do here is to add another dude into this conversation to talk about it. I think it's probably best. It's just me today. And, of course we could go, we may wander back into it, but, I don't know. I think, we'll let the women do the speaking at least by reading their articles and discussing whether or not, how we feel about that. And then we could have had Armando in to discuss on some of that. But let me get to this very strange backgrounder on the evangelical community on this. Again, written by a woman. So I guess that's helpful in diversifying if not the literal voices you're hearing, then what would we say? Is that metaphor? No, this is their voices. It's my voice, but it's their words. Anyway. Where were we? We were just finding out about, one, how common this sort of early marriage concept is among evangelicals, and that even evangelicals sometimes say, whoa, hold on a second. These people we're having speak to our church groups and our homeschooling groups. Homeschooling, that is interesting. Might be a little flakier than we thought. We were surprised about that. I don't know about this 15-year-old marriage thing. I mean, holy moly. I'm not too happy about it. Neither were they. It's weird, though, that they find themselves shocked. Well, what did you think you were talking about exactly? Anyway, child marriage advocate Vaughn Ullman followed more or less the same arc, although I bet I don't know, do you think he calls himself a child marriage advocate. He probably early marriage. They're looking for euphemisms and all this. But I mean, we are talking about children in some cases. So he followed more or less the same arc. Let's talk once again about that arc. He made a career out of speaking at homeschool conventions. By the way, that is an interesting concept all by itself. The homeschooling communities and conventions, they're obviously naturally and for good reasons going to organize, but for bootstrapping, self-reliant people, does it ever occur to them how frequently they feel the need to come together and pool their resources and share teaching materials and share observations at a convention, which basically really reads to me like, you know what you need? School. You just want a different kind of school. And I mean, there's no really practical way to school people who remotely and independently prefer this kind of alternative education without actually just doing it at home, because you can't just beam people together to their schools and say, well, we're not homeschooling. We're just, well, it really means is we hate a regular organized schooling situations that are available to us here where we live, and so we're going to make something up and do it at home. But the frequency with which they end up buying standardized curricula and gathering at these conventions suggests to me, your natural inclination is really to do this collectively. It's just a physical barrier. But you should contemplate what that means once in a while. But they're too busy contemplating how early they could arrange for their kids to get married, I guess. At least some of them. Anyway, it's not all homeschoolers. There's your new hashtag for this. So Vaughn Ullman is the next weirdo up for bids. He made a career out of speaking at homeschool conventions until the wider world heard tell, again, thanks to Homeschoolers Anonymous, of his planned retreat for families to arrange child marriages. Wow, that sounds really super creepy. That's a meat market for kids. Gross. Don't do it. Now, the article breaks there and then picks up with this item. I skimmed this earlier and I was confused about the transition here. Duck Dynasty star Phil Robertson advocated for adult men to marry 15 and 16-year-old girls and deemed age 20 too old because, quote, you wait until they get to be 20 years old. The only picking that's going to take place is your pocket. But that leads me to a cultural issue. What is picking? What kind of picking were you hoping for that isn't pocket picking? I don't know. And do I have to be like from wherever the hell, Louisiana or wherever stupid place? Do I have to have that kind of beard? I'm working on that, by the way. But does anybody know what he means by that? Is it like a euphemism of some kind, or is it sexual innuendo? What the hell is he talking about? I don't know. Who cares? He's from Duck Dynasty. Why would I bother worrying about what kind of advice he's trying to give? Homeschool leader Kevin Swanson, whose 2015 convention was attended by several Republican presidential candidates. Why? Answer, homeschooling isn't about doing things independently. It's about doing things from an ideological perspective. Hello? Defended Robertson on his radio show after the story broke. Advocating for child marriage hasn't slowed down Robertson's career. He just got a new show on the conservative digital network CRTV. Never heard of it, don't care. But, I thought we were done with that guy. As a teenager, by the way, is this a current piece here? Yeah, it is. I wondered about that. So I guess that's true. He did just get a new show on whatever CRTV is. As a teenager, our writer says, I attended a lecture on courtship. I'm glad I missed that one. By a homeschool speaker who was popular at the time. Again, like, does a homeschool speaker doesn't go from home to home, does he? He probably gathers people up at these conventions. Again, you're looking for a collective experience. Why don't you just have it? Whatever. As a teenager, I attended a lecture on courtship by a homeschool speaker who was popular at the time. He praised the idea of, quote, early courtship, unquote. So, Why? This is interesting. This is interesting and gross. Ready? He praised the idea of early courtship so the girl could be molded into the best possible helpmeet for her future husband. The girl's father was expected to direct her education after the courtship began so she could help her future husband in his work. And that's a pretty broad mandate, by the way. And I think we probably would be surprised, or maybe not, at what sort of help in his work he might, A, think he needs, B, feel entitled to, and C, she might feel obligated to provide. And I bet an awful lot of it doesn't really have a great deal to do with work. But okay, I guess we might also be surprised in how far the girl's fathers frequently will go to direct her education that way. I don't know. In retrospect, I understand what the speaker was really describing. Adult men selecting and grooming girls who were too young to have life experience. Another word for that is predation. Yes, bring girls up so that they understand only one thing. That is, you are here to make it possible for some older dude to, quote unquote, do his work. And sometimes I just get so tense at work. You get where I'm going here? Well, that's normal, honey. You're supposed to be the best possible helpmeet for your husband's work in the world. And what are we talking about here, generally speaking? Are we like, it's super important that those cabinets get made correctly, or what kind of work is going on? I mean, that occasionally will happen, but very frequently, I guess the most ardent practitioners of this tend to be people whose work is essentially grifting from the rest of the homeschool and church community. I'm going to get into the business of going around to churches, selling the idea that you should be grooming young girls so that you can have the best possible helpmeet for you to also get out there and grift off of churches and homeschooling groups. That's basically what it ends up being. But even if it is making fine cabinetry, and I'm sure it's fine cabinetry, some people just have a regular life and a regular aged partner and make perfectly good cabinetry that way. But okay, whatever. It's cover for what's going on here. Why do I have a 15-year-old wife? 'Cause God. That's why. Don't ask me questions. It's God. Much of the sexual abuse that takes place in independent fundamentalist, it does take place, not in just this place, but much of it takes place in independent fundamentalist Baptist churches, or IFB churches, involves adult men targeting 14 to 16-year-old girls. Here's the interesting part. If caught, the teenage victim may be forced to repent the sin, in quotes here, of having seduced an adult man. Now, that's a really interesting situation here. So this independent fundamentalist Baptist church says you should absolutely marry girls that are 14 to 16 years old. But if you get caught doing it, it's the girl's fault. In other words, if we change our mind and say, whoa, wait a second, she's too young, it's her fault for seducing you. What a fantastic setup. You know what? I love teenage girls. Just want to prey on teenage girls all day long. Can't get enough predatory behavior in my schedule for my tastes, but the mall won't let me do it. What am I going to do? The answer is join a church that says it's okay. And if you get caught either by secular authorities or by us, like actually I joined this church so that I could marry a 14-year-old, and I did, and I had 19 kids, and now you're trying to date one of them who's 14, and I believe it or not, for some strange reason, I hath a hankering for grabbing ye holy shotgun and blowing your head off, hypocritical though that may be. In other words, if you get caught, what am I going to do? And the answer is, damn near honor kill my daughter, essentially. It's her fault and all this. You go find another 14-year-old, not mine, NIMBY, when it comes to predation in my backyard. Anyway, isn't that interesting? Former IFB megachurch pastor Jack Schaap, very close to Schlapp, and I would suggest to you that you could make either a Schaap or a Schlapp if you hit somebody with a dead fish. That's worth knowing. Long-time listeners will know what we're talking about here. The rest of you are confused, but probably already vomiting anyway. Former IFB megachurch pastor Jack Schaap argued that he should be released from prison after being convicted of molesting a 16-year-old girl, asserting that the, quote, aggressiveness of his victim inhibited, I'm choking on the words, inhibited his impulse control. I couldn't help myself. She was too hot. Did you see what she was wearing? It's another version of the same thing over and over again, obviously. So no surprise to anybody there, but how do you like that? I should be let out of prison for this because she was too hot. How interesting is that? Anyway, interesting enough that he was in prison for molesting a 16-year-old girl, whereas Roy Moore is going to be elected to the Senate maybe for molesting a 14-year-old girl. Well, what an interesting argument that is. And by the way, it probably didn't work, but this has almost certainly already occurred to him. But you can look for this one coming to a court near you sometime soon. I should be released from prison for molesting a 16-year-old girl because Hobby Lobby. How do you like that one? It's my sincerely held Christian belief that I absolutely had to molest this 16-year-old girl. First of all, God works in strange and mysterious ways. I don't know why he made her so hot. He just did. And I couldn't help myself. I was trying to be fruitful and multiply, which my church says is a great idea. Even if it is your daughter, Judge, who knows? But basically, he's going to want to eventually try and Hobby Lobby his way out of that one. In the wake of the to Matt Schlapp, I mean Jack Schaap, not Matt Schlapp. Blah, blah, blah. Say that 10 times fast. I can't even say it once slowly. In the wake of the Schaap case, numerous other stories emerged, and it's linked so you can see how numerous they are. Chicago Magazine has that one. Ooh, I like the title of their piece. Let Us Pray, Prey. Big Trouble at First Baptist Church. Man, that's tough. In the wake of this case, numerous other stories emerged of sexual abuse cover-ups involving teenage girls at IFB churches. In another high-profile case, pregnant 15-year-old Tina Anderson, who was raped by a church deacon twice her age, not even getting married, just raped by her, was forced to confess her sin to the congregation. Dang, that's tough. Prominent conservative Reformed theologian Doug Wilson has a documented history of mishandling sexual abuse cases within his congregation. Nevertheless, he continues to be promoted by evangelical leaders such as John Piper, whose Desiring God site still publishes Wilson's work. When a 13-year-old girl in Wilson's congregation was sexually abused, Wilson argued that she and her abuser were in a parent-sanctioned courtship, and that this was a mitigating factor. There is no shortage of such stories. A Presbyterian Church in America, or PCA, that's a movement, not just any random Presbyterian church that happened to be here in the United States. A PCA pastor attempted to discipline a woman who warned homeschool parents of the convicted sex offender in his congregation. How do you like that? Look out, there's a sex offender here. We definitely want to warn parents about that, right? No, he's not a sex offender. He's a courtly kind of fellow looking for a wife. The sex offender had gone online, by the way, to solicit a 14-year-old girl for sex, and that's not allowed because, as you know, God isn't online. Another PCA church allowed that same convicted sex offender to give the invocation at a homeschool graduation ceremony, where, of course, there would be lots of kids. But they were too old for him. He wasn't perceived as an attempted child rapist, and he was repentant. But Al Franken. Growing up, I witnessed an influential religious right leader flirting with some of my teenage friends and receiving neck and shoulder massages from one of them. For God. I've been expecting a scandal to break with him for years, but in the meantime, this man has put significant time into campaigning for anti-trans bathroom bills while deeming trans people. Why? Why does he oppose bathroom bills? Because they're predators. Yeah. The allegations against Roy Moore are merely a symptom of a larger problem. It's not a Southern problem or an Alabama problem. It's a Christian fundamentalist problem. Billy Graham's grandson, what is God's name? How did he get this? His grandson's name is Boz, what? Chivid, look at it. T-C-H-I-V, Chividjian, T-C-H-I-V-I-D-J-I-A-N. You can please excuse me for this one. Chividjian? Maybe? Boz Chividjian, who leads the organization GRACE, which is in all capitals and therefore is an acronym and stands for Godly Response to Abuse in a Christian Environment. Okay, Billy Graham's grandson, this guy is, leads GRACE, believes that the sexual abuse problem in Protestant communities is on a par with that in the Catholic Church. And I don't know why you wouldn't guess that. That actually sounds like a pretty sensible supposition. It's probably on a par everywhere because there's human beings in all these churches. The evangelical world is overdue for a reckoning. Women raised in evangelicalism and fundamentalism have for years discussed the normalization of child sexual abuse. We've told our stories on social media and on our blogs and various online platforms. But until the Roy Moore story broke, mainstream American society barely paid attention. Everyone assumed this was an isolated fringe issue. It isn't. And, well, I'm glad it was brought to my attention. This happens with a lot of things. Everybody assumes all things are isolated fringe issues. I mean, I actually found that to be the case with kids finding loose weapons and shooting themselves. Everybody thinks that, oh, that's tragic. But how many times could that possibly happen? And occasionally, only by doing what I did people start to say, I am reading an awful lot about this. Is this happening more often? Nah, it's happening about the same as usual. It's just you're paying attention to it now because we're collecting the stories. Okay. Well, that's well worth noting and clearly something that you're going to have to keep in mind in all of this and see if it's a common denominator and what we discover along the way. Let's see. Other interesting items still connected in some way to Roy Moore, but with on the political side. I thought I might add this piece. You know, we've been discussing all the various schemes for replacing him, either should he win election or if they could convince Luther Strange to step down, all of that we discussed yesterday. This news from Roll Call, Governor Ivey down in Alabama quashes idea of Strange resigning early to block Roy Moore. Alabama governor says a special election will go forward as planned on December 12th. Alabama Governor Kay Ivey has rejected the idea that Senator Luther Strange could resign his Senate seat, sparking a new special election and potentially blocking Roy Moore from being elected to the Senate. Lots of law professors weighing in on the impropriety / unconstitutionality, likely unconstitutionality of that scenario too, and they're well-founded. But the more important difference here is that the governor says, well, it's up to me. At the very least, to even start this controversy, if Luther Strange were to resign and I were to use the power that I have to call a new special election, never mind, stop there, because I'm not calling a new special election, period, the end. National Republican leaders have called on Moore to step aside as the GOP nominee following allegations of sexual misconduct and assault. Politico reported Wednesday that one idea GOP leaders had contemplated is having Strange resign his seat so Ivey could set a new special election. Strange was appointed to the seat in February when Jeff Sessions resigned to become Attorney General. Ivey, the first female Republican governor of Alabama, rejected that in a Wednesday night interview with AL.com. The election date is set for December 12th, period. And that's all there is to it, basically. It's set for December 12th. Were Strange to resign, I would simply appoint somebody to fill the remaining time until we have that election on December 12th. Strange told the Washington Examiner on Wednesday he did not intend to resign his seat early. He will serve until the new senator is sworn in. Why? Because if you don't get sworn in, you're not a senator. I just want to throw that out there. And then if he didn't serve until the new senator was sworn in, you see, then they would be short one senator during the time between the election being certified and the swearing in. Because swearing in is important. I just want you all to realize that. On becoming governor in April, Ivey moved the Senate special election to this year. In case we didn't mention this earlier, former Governor Robert Bentley had previously scheduled the election to coincide with the 2018 midterms. Bentley, who appointed Strange, later resigned amid scandal — it's a sex scandal — and faced charges for using state resources to cover up an extramarital affair. By the way, also alleged in this was that he prevailed upon Luther Strange as the then-serving Attorney General of Alabama to help in that cover-up, and as a reward made him a senator. How strange things are there. Maybe there is also an Alabama problem on top of the evangelicalism problem, and the strange prevalence of evangelicalism in Alabama simply highlights that problem. Ivey's statement highlights the increasingly limited options facing Senate Republicans who do not want Moore to become a U.S. Senator. Sort of. The former Chief Justice of the Alabama Supreme Court, who beat Strange in the GOP primary, will face Democrat Doug Jones in the December 12th election. Recent allegations of sexual misconduct have rocked the race over the past week. 9 women, they say, have come forward saying Moore made sexual and romantic advances. I don't know. Why put in and romantic? Well, most while they were teenagers, and Moore was in his 30s. 3 have accused him of sexual assault, 2 of whom were teenagers at the time. Moore has denied any wrongdoing and says he'll stay in the race. So that's where we are with that. All right. Anyway, almost coming up on third break time. We got to get a move on at some point over to some of the more substantive stories about other things going on. There's, of course, the tax story. The House passed their version of the tax bill yesterday. It is, of course, horrific. The Senate expected, I guess, at some point to take theirs up, but likewise, I guess we should point out, no hearings on this thing, no attempt to include Democratic input on this thing, although Orrin Hatch, I think it was out front in insisting that the door had always been open for Democrats, and they simply refused to sit down and add their ideas or put their ideas on the table. But of course, there were no hearings. Zero. None. There was no opportunity to put any ideas on the table, nor would it have made much difference because they would have voted them down on party lines, but they didn't even actually have a table to sit at assigned to the proceedings because there weren't any proceedings. Anyway, yes, Topher Spiro is in fact talking about that this morning. He says, I think what bothers me most about Hatch is his self-righteousness on process when he's held no hearings and wrote an intentionally partisan reconciliation bill. We should remind everyone it is a reconciliation bill behind closed doors. So, yeah, apparently he got himself in a tizzy when confronted by Sherrod Brown in what passed for the Senate, the only committee proceedings on the bill, the reporting part of the proceedings, and moving the Senate bill forward and getting it ready for the floor, and Sherrod Brown calling him out on what's in there, which is to say all the horrible things that we've been talking about up to now, including all the cuts that Joan mentioned yesterday, and one by one, other items being revealed as people get a hold of the text and realize it does such fun things. We already know all the other tax deductions that it eliminates, but it also treats college tuition benefits as income. So, for instance, as one story from up in Boston was featuring a janitor who worked at Boston College, mopped floors at Boston College his whole life so that he could put his 5 kids through college there for free, because it's one of those institutions that says, hey, if you're an employee of the college, we'll let your kids go here tuition free. And how else would he have been able to afford tuition for 5 children? That's now going to tax that as income. It's going to crush this janitor who gave his life, work to getting his kids through college, and he's going to have to pay taxes on what? On the mop and the bucket. The value of the tuition, which he could never afford, is now going to be assigned to him as income, and he's going to owe taxes on it. Isn't that nice? In the meantime, they are, in fact, continuing the tax breaks that rich people have given themselves for years for the purchase and maintenance and depreciation of their own private jets. Do you know anybody, by the way, who doesn't have any college debt, doesn't have any kids to put through college using college debt, doesn't have any medical expenses to deduct anyway because he gets free government-paid, taxpayer-funded health care from now on, and also owns some private jets? Who does that sound like to you? We'd have to look at his taxes and see. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show. We got one more segment to wind down with, and I just don't know exactly what we should do with it. There's so much. But I guess it makes it easy to think of themes for shows during the Thanksgiving break, should we manage to find some time to pre-record them. I think we're going to have to do like a lightning round worth of stuff. At this point, it might actually be worth jumping off of the tax situation. I know I've got in here in pocket somewhere a great list of the most egregious provisions of at least the House bill, but now that having been made a done deal on the House side, we should probably focus on the Senate side, and I don't know how much analysis we have to date on that. But there are a number of other things that, it being Friday, you should probably know about before the weekend. First of all, and we're going to go in reverse order of where it is in pocket, a tweet from Crystal Ball. Yes, I know. It always cracks me up that that's her name. But anyway, this reminder of something happening in Virginia. The legislative race is still not entirely settled, and we just don't know how things are going to break down in the Virginia House of Delegates and in the Virginia Senate. But there are lots of recounts underway, for which, of course, they always need to raise money in order to pay the lawyers for all this. So be on the lookout for methods to join in, let's say, with your fellow Daily Kos readers and other progressives online to chip in a couple of bucks to help pay for some of these recounts. Some of these races are really close and might even flip more seats. Here's an interesting case that has arisen from these recount situations. Not sure what the hell to do with this one. It's going to be really interesting to see what the Board of Elections recommends here. But Crystal was tweeting out the other day that she was on a press call that was going on. Virginia Dems saying that 668 voters in a liberal area were given the wrong ballots in a House of Delegates race. They showed up at their regular voting precinct, and for some reason, the wrong ballots were there and were distributed for, I guess, the next house, the next district over, and they got the wrong ballots. And I guess maybe I assume that that's all the voters, voters who showed up at this precinct, but maybe not, or maybe halfway through the day they got the wrong ballots. I don't know what happened. There's no explanation of it. They got the wrong ballot, and they ended up voting in the wrong district. Now, another thought just occurred to me as we were thinking about this, but I'll read you this. They got the wrong ballot. That race, though, was won by the Republican candidate by a total of 82 votes. There were, of course, other precincts voting in that district, and they got the right ballot. So a margin of 82 votes separates the apparent Republican winner from the Democrat in that race. But 668 voters in a fairly liberal area just didn't count in the race because they got the wrong ballots. That would flip that seat and control of the House. That's a totally separate race that's out there and could actually result in a Democratic majority in the House of Delegates. They don't know. I mean, what are you going to do with it? Courts are going to hate the idea of finding those 668 voters and giving them the right ballot because it's after the fact. And the idea that all the other votes should get counted and then these 668 should get the chance to decide the race with pre-knowledge of how close it is. And I mean, I guess they could monitor things and simply say only people who checked in and voted at this precinct, only this 668 that we know about, are going to get a chance to vote again, unless something really screwy happened where they had more than one ballot distributed at this precinct and they know they have 668 ballots for the wrong precinct, but they don't know who cast them, and not everybody who voted at that precinct got that same ballot, in which case total chaos. And they also hate the idea of contesting that single election again, given the fact that everybody knows that the House of Delegates could be tied at that point and that the control of the whole thing rides on this. They can't, I don't think, open it up to allow people who skipped voting the first time to come out and vote a second time, in the second time around, knowing how close things were. Although, you know, it might seem like it would be to our advantage since it's a liberal area, but they can't recontest the whole seat everywhere where people had the correct ballot. I don't know. It's very weird. And this is one of those very unsatisfying situations where they may just say, well, there's just some ballot spoilage and that's that. And the 82 vote margin stands and you get to represent this area, which may very well have preferred a Democratic candidate. And according to, by the way, Hugh Hewitt, I guess we would, have to, if we tried Hugh Hewitt's logic, look, these people deserve to be represented by who they ordinarily prefer. And, well, I think that I don't know. We'll see. I don't know how they're going to resolve that one. If it's a discrete thing where they know who were the people who got the wrong ballot, I wouldn't be terribly surprised if they said, yeah, you deserved a chance at the correct ballot, and it's unfortunate that you're now going to cast your vote knowing the outcome of everybody else's, but we might just have to give it to you. That's a really weird situation. All right. That's a great one that you need to be aware of. Let's make you aware of this. Our good friend, formerly in the Obama White House, Jesse Lee, calling Grover Norquist to account yesterday over the horrific Republican tax plan based on Kevin Drum's look at the Republican tax plan. The folks at Mother Jones put together a chart based on information that came out of the Joint Committee on Taxation, explaining how upside down the Republican tax bill is. In fact, they put it this way: Republican tax plan is now officially bat crap, we'll say, crazy. And the chart is the chart's very clear, but it's a little confusing because of the units they're talking about. But it very clearly illustrates how this bill increases the tax burden on the lower rungs of the income ladders and cuts the tax burden on the upper rungs on the tax ladder. I say it's confusing because it's very easy to look at this chart and see the units used on the y-axis. Is that right? the vertical axis as dollar amounts that you, if you are in this income range, will pay in additional taxes, and that's not what it means. It is, in fact, in millions of dollars, and is trying to show you how much the entire tax bracket is going to pay overall. So, for instance, one of the big peak on the lower end of the scale here is from the $20,000 to $30,000 income bracket. The number is just over more than that, 8,000 is what it appears to be on the vertical axis. It's not that if you earn $20,000 to $30,000, your taxes are going to go up by $6,000 to $8,000. It is that 6,000, you'll see the units is millions of dollars. So that $6,000 million or $6 billion in additional revenue is going to be, in additional taxes, is going to be taken from the entire $20,000 to $30,000 taxpayer bracket. $6 billion or $8 billion in additional taxes across all the people in America who pay in that bracket, is what's being said. But the effect is still the same. Taxes go up for everyone up to $75,000. Taxes go down for everyone $75,000 and over. And why in the world would you do such a thing? And the answer is, we represent the people over $75,000 and we're going to do it. Meanwhile, Jesse is asking Grover Norquist, did you ever mean a single thing that you ever said, or are you just a paid looter pillager for your millionaire donors? In other words, he's actually talking not only about the fact that this is an upside down tax bill, but that Grover Norquist is nowhere to be found now that, as we mentioned the other day, Republicans, for instance, needed to waive their rule making it harder to raise people's taxes by requiring a 3/5 vote in order to raise taxes, because they would ordinarily have considered the elimination of tax deductions to be a tax increase. Every time an elimination is proposed by Democrats, Grover Norquist says, oh no, that's a backdoor tax increase. I'm calling you out on that, and I'm holding my Republicans to their pledge not to increase taxes by opposing this. Grover was silent about his pledges, which almost every Republican in the House broke yesterday. He's been nowhere to be found on all this. And to the extent that he speaks up, he says, well, that's not a tax increase. It always is every time a Democrat proposes it, but not when a Republican does. So that's a subject for discussion over the weekend as well. Let's see. Two stories that are too involved, and we'll skip over and discuss those perhaps next week. And you know what? If we sat around and had a guessing game, I bet you would guess what they were. But I'll just tease you and say we're going to have to discuss those later next week. Maybe Monday, maybe Tuesday, maybe Wednesday. Maybe in pre-recorded shows for Thursday or Friday. Anyway, let's see. Here's something that I wanted to share with you, and this is an easier one to share prior to the weekend. Where are we looking at here? International Business Times, Andrew Perez, and I think a little bit of auto-playing video. We'll try and head that off. Oh, look, there was a crash. That didn't work. Okay. Top GOP law enforcement chiefs held secret weekend event at Mar-a-Lago. How do you like that one? It goes along, if I recall correctly, with some tweets about this, but I don't think I put those aside. But yes, David Sirota's observation on Twitter, I think, is what I'm thinking of. What he noted, that while Democratic attorneys general were meeting and are coordinating across states to find out, let's say, how to get at the Trump-Russia money laundering, among other things, Republican attorneys general were meeting to plot Republican strategy at Mar-a-Lago and paying Donald Trump for the privilege of doing it. That seems like a pretty important observation. Andrew Perez is actually from MapLight, which is an organization that I think comes from out of the Sunlight Foundation originally, that tracks the way political money is spent. And this is a pretty interesting one. Republican state law enforcement official chiefs, those would be attorneys general, dined with their top donors at President Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago resort last weekend, according to an agenda obtained by MapLight through a public records request. An agenda for the Republican Attorneys General Association fall meeting in Palm Beach, Florida, lists a dinner on Friday at Mar-a-Lago's Tea House restaurant for, quote, Edmund Randolph Club members. I hate when they name their clubs for obscure founders, but okay. The club, named for the nation's first attorney general, I guess isn't all that obscure, includes donors who give the Republican Attorneys General Association, which, by the way, is RAGA, not unlike MAGA, after all. If you give them at least $125,000 a year, you're a member of the club. The reception at Mar-a-Lago was not publicized, and privacy was apparently a priority, despite the resort's blurring of lines between private events and White House business. How do you like this one? Cell phone use and taking pictures is prohibited in all areas now, all of a sudden. The agenda says if guests need to take a phone call, they may do so in the guest reception area or outside. Since Trump was elected, corporate lobbyists and foreign leaders have made frequent use of his family's hotels. While Trump has publicly handed off his private business, to his adult sons, he hasn't divested from it. They're all being held in trust for him, of course, raising questions about whether the president is violating the emoluments clause. He is. Though Trump has spent at least 25 days at Mar-a-Lago since becoming president, he was traveling in Asia on a 12-day tour during the Raga reception at the club. The agenda was obtained by a map light through public records requests to the Nebraska Attorney General's office, Doug Peterson there, one of 29 Republican attorneys general. The White House and Raga did not immediately respond to questions from MapLight. The association, which is a 527 organization that can raise unlimited amounts from individuals and corporations, has enjoyed a surge in funding originally enjoyed it during the Obama administration as attorneys general banded together to challenge new environmental, healthcare, and immigration regulations. After he was elected, Trump chose a previous Raga chairman, former Oklahoma Attorney General Scott Pruitt, to lead the Environmental Protection Agency, which is a horrible choice and among the worst he could have made. Anyway, just wanted to get that one on the record there, and the comparison, state attorneys general who are Democrats getting together to think about how to prosecute the Trump money laundering, Republican attorneys general getting together to further the Trump money laundering and add their own money to it at that. So a good study in contrast there for your weekend. Let's see. Other items that require at least our short-term discussion. How do you like this one? This is a good title here from HuffPost. Interior decorator Ryan Zinke, the Secretary of the Interior. Zinke's push to redesign flags and accessorize with dead animals. I know they're going to have some auto-playing video. HuffPost never fails on that one. Chris D'Angelo has this story. Remember those days when we thought that perhaps Ryan Zinke might end up, because he was so obscure and had a relatively obscure cabinet department, might end up being one of the least corrupt of the Trump administration, and he very quickly turned that one around, not just with Whitefish Energy, but with his weird predilection for ceremony and decoration. I skipped the initial stories on these. I put them aside, but I never really got around to it. But it's turning out there's just too much to ignore here. So Chris D'Angelo reports, a week after taking over the Department of the Interior, Ryan Zinke inquired about redesigning the agency's flag, according to internal emails HuffPost has obtained. Now, you might originally say, who cares? But then on the other hand, who cares? Why are you spending time on this? There might not be anything for the Department of the Interior to do. I don't know. But redesigning the flag can't be the top priority, but that's what he wanted to do. The departmental flag is emblazoned with a bison and has gone largely unchanged for a century. The emails indicate that Zinke wanted to redesign the flag and make them bigger. That's a hell of a redesign. So that neither his secretarial flag nor the agency flag, there are two, did you realize that, would be smaller than the United States flag that flies atop the Interior Department's headquarters on C Street in Washington, D.C. The emails do not indicate how he wants to redesign the flag, like what should actually be on it. The redesign he's discussed is, I want them made bigger. Interesting, by the way. I mean, one, who could possibly care? Two, if you are going to redesign them to be bigger, why would you say, I want them to be as big as the American flag? Wouldn't like your understanding of flag protocol, if anything, dictate that the American flag be bigger and more prominent than the secretarial flag or the departmental flag? Maybe he's just one of those aesthetes who insists that everything be the same size. And I guess it's permissible that they be the same size. They can't be larger. That would clearly be in violation of the flag code. But I guess if they're the same size, so long as they're displayed in the correct order from one side to the next, and I think the flag is supposed to be always to its own right of everything. I don't know how they do it on the roof of the Interior Department, but Anyway, I don't really know why he would bother with this, except we do learn sort of how he got into the flag game in the first place. The emails shine more light on Zinke's revival of an obscure military flag flying tradition. Now, he is ex-military, but as the Washington Post reported last month, this is what I never got to on the air. When Zinke enters the building, a security staffer takes the elevator to the 7th floor, climbs the stairs to the roof, and hoists a special secretarial flag. When he goes home, the flag comes down. Like the President of the United States, like the Speaker of the House, whatever he wants, like a general, he wants a special flag flown at the top of the building to show Ryan Zinke's in the building, ladies and gentlemen. Can you believe this guy? I mean, you got to be really super full of yourself to want to do that and to bother with that. Whoa, holy crap. Did you guys see that? The Secretary of the Interior. He's in that building. Really? Wow, that is unusual. What building is that? It's the Department of the Interior. So the flag was raised to show that he went to work? I mean, does he have one of those little flags on his limo when he goes places? Like, I want a 1-star flag. I'm a general now. He got a secretarial flag. Can you imagine wasting the time with this? And by the way, I don't know, Secretary of the Interior, he's a Republican, so he doesn't give a crap one way or the other. But really? We got to waste the energy now hoisting the elevator 7 floors so he can do the there can't be a flag already up there and you can't radio. Hoist the flag. It's got to be the guy who reports. And now he wants like a guy snapping to attention. Sir, Mr. Secretary, sir, I'll go run up and raise that flag. Here I go. By the way, run, take the stairs. Anyway, what a jerk. Zinke was sworn in on March 1st and arrived at his post, you may recall, the following morning, sporting a cowboy hat and riding a horse. You imagine he gets here, soldier, hold my mount. All right, fine, I'll be right on it. The flag inquiries by the former Minnesota congressman and Navy SEAL were part of a broader revamping at Interior that included outfitting his office with a slew of taxidermied creatures and a bronze bust of his hero, Teddy Roosevelt, who would never have stood for that flag. The redesign seems to have left the Interior staff scrambling and scratching their heads. Yeah, can't make this stuff up. Joe Nasser, Director of Interior's Office of Facilities and Administrative Services, wrote to several other Interior employees a few weeks later, referring to the pending delivery of a stuffed bobcat. 1 week after Zinke took office, Elena Gonzalez, Interior's Deputy Assistant Secretary for Technology, Information, and Business Services, sent an email to Douglas Domenech. That's a name that rings a bell. Domenech. Does he have any relationship to Ben? I don't know. Then a senior advisor to the new secretary, addressing several flag-related queries. We think the Interior flags can be of any size so long as they are not larger than the American flag, Gonzalez wrote, adding that Nasser would look into current flag proportions. This is how they're spending their time. Government dime, by the way. I am not sure whether the secretary can redesign either his flag or the Interior flag. Happy to find out if you need that information as well. Great, replied Domenech, who was later nominated and confirmed as Interior's Assistant Secretary for Insular Areas. He requested the chapter of the agency manual on displaying and flying flags and wrote, yes, find out if Zinke can change the DOI flag and how. In an email the next day, Gonzalez wrote that the questions about redesigning the flags were taking a bit longer to answer. Apparently, she spelled it wrong, but apparently not a common question, she wrote. Yeah, nobody's changed it for 100 years. Not a common question because not necessary, stupid, annoying, self-aggrandizing, and idiotic. The Interior Department, by the way, first adopted a flag in 1917, the first appearance of the flag's distinctive bison. Over the last 100 years, the bison seal and presumably the flag have twice been replaced, first with an eagle in the 1920s and later to an image of hands holding the sun, mountains, and water in the late 1960s. But both times reverted to the bison. The current flag design appears to have gone largely unchanged since the 1960s, according to the Flag Book of the United States. If the flagpole atop the Interior building is any indication, Zinke has thus far been unsuccessful in his bid to replace the flags with ones that have his own touch. Interior does appear to have ordered larger flags, at least, ensuring that Zinke's personal flag will not be dwarfed by Old Glory. Of course not. Why would you want that? When Zinke is in the building, 3 proportional flags fly atop the building. How nice. And it's good that they're proportional because, I don't know. I mean, really, as long as the secretarial flag is visible, you know he's in the building. What they want to do is scream that he's in the building. Everyone should know and be able to see from far away that he's in the building. In a March 9th email, Nasser brought Domenech up to speed on the dimensions of the flags atop headquarters. At the time, the U.S. flag was significantly larger than Interior's, and said he checked with several folks, and no one recalls any secretary, at least from the 1980s until now, having the secretarial flag flown from the roof. Charles Spain, a co-director of the Houston-based Flag Research Center, there is such a thing, said it is unusual for an agency flag to be the same size as the U.S. flag, and Spain said it seems as if President Donald Trump and several members of his cabinet are enamored with military trappings. I think there's more of a military bent toward the use of flags than we've seen in previous administrations, he told HuffPost. Interior spokeswoman Heather Swift and several people involved in the email exchanges did not respond to HuffPost's request for comment on Monday. Nasser was reached by phone but declined to comment and directed HuffPost to Swift. Along with entertaining unconventional flag requests, Interior staff worked through March to get the agency chief's office to his liking, emails show. The effort involved shuffling around a huge grizzly bear, mounting the heads of a bison and elk directly into the office's carved oak paneling, and accommodating the arrival of a $1,749 leather couch from California that included white glove delivery service. How nice. Basically, though, essentially, this is Aaron Schock all over again, spending all his time redecorating and shuffling around the bits and pieces, and let's have a flag that looks like that, and my aesthetics determine how I'm going to spend my day. Has he done anything besides arrange contracts for cronies and redecorate? I don't know. A large stuffed grizzly will arrive at main Interior building today at approximately noon. Daniel Giorgiani, a former Koch brothers advisor, by the way, appointed in May to the position of principal deputy solicitor, wrote to 7 agency employees on March 21st. If possible, please make sure it clears security and is taken to the secretary's office. He would like it placed in the corner where his collection of Navy SEAL knives are currently located. What a jerk this guy is. He would like that table moved to the other side of the room, next to where the doors lead out of his office into the main corridor. Super important. Less than a month after the bear showed up, it was temporarily moved to allow for artwork to be hung on the wall behind it. Mounting the heads of a trophy elk and a bison Zinke has named Rosie proved onerous. First, the delay in transporting them from his old congressional office left Zinke not extremely happy, as Nasser put it. Once the heads arrived at Interior, an assistant apparently suggested putting them in a cabinet or display case, but Zinke was not keen on that idea, insisting they be mounted on the wall. Employees then tried to outfit the heads with D-rings in a final attempt to preserve the historic woodwork, but the bison proved too top-heavy, and eventually the heads were installed directly into the wall. So yes, historic woodwork, beautiful old-school stuff. I don't care. Screw it right in there. Essentially, I'm going to mess up the walls just to make sure that I have my decorations here. He's just that particular. Well, what are you going to do? The secretary wants what the secretary wants, the secretary gets. Ever since the days of Aaron Schock, I guess, and we're no longer shocked by such things. Not a super important story, but then neither is the Department of Interior a super important department in many cases. And certainly the secretary shouldn't be spending so much of his time making sure that his office is to his liking and everybody knows he's in it, or when he's goofing off, I guess, and the flag is down. I don't know where we get these jerks, but I don't know. It makes an interesting point for conversation. Probably a little too long on that point for the end of the day. But anyway, we do have more fantastic programming coming up here on Netroots Radio, of course. And then, of course, we're going to say, of course, a couple times. Of course, remember that we're still looking forward to the debut of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. That's Justice's new show on Monday. Well, we don't have all the bells and whistles in place, he says, but it'll grow as the show grows, and so you can look forward to being on hand and being in on the ground floor of the development of the show. Today, background briefing, once again, will follow Kagro in the morning, so do stay tuned and see if they bring you something a little more substantial than the jackass Interior Secretary redecorating his little office space there and screwing up the woodwork at that. He doesn't preserve anything, including the walls of his own office. Stay tuned, though, and we'll tell you a little bit about what our plans are for next week after this.
From Daily Co's Radio on networksradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
Thanks for sticking with us for the week. And, of course, next week will be shortened because of the Thanksgiving holiday. Thursday and Friday almost certainly will be off the air. Whether we go with reruns or pre-recorded shows depends on my stamina over the weekend. Guessing game on Wednesday. We got some doctor's appointments to take care of. We'll update you when we come back on Monday.